In this video, we're going to be talking about the newest book in the Fazbear Frights universe, I guess? This new book is called Gumdrop Angel, and it's a weird one, and that's saying something considering what the past stories have been like. You can check those out on my channel as well. But this one is really interesting, and we're going to be going over the first story today, which is apparently, I haven't read the other ones yet, but apparently this is the least interesting out of the three, and I still thought it was really odd, so let's get going. But first,
only a small percentage of my viewers are actually subscribed. If you want to see more, consider subscribing.
it's free and you can always unsubscribe later. So this story follows a girl named Angel, and she's at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza when the story begins. She's there with her family, which is her sister, or stepsister Ophelia, her stepfather, Myron, and her mother, Bianca. Now, Angel's real father died when she was young, and so her mother remarried a pretty wealthy man, which is weird because basically every character in this series is not very well off money-wise. So this is different, I guess, in that way. And this story does a lot of similar things to other stories, actually. For instance, in The Flesh, where we have our main character, Matt. This kind of reminds me of that, those really grumpy characters that we've seen before, only with Angel, it's done a lot better because you can understand where she's coming from. With those other characters, they were just awful for some reason, but with Angel, it's different because you can kind of actually understand where this is coming from for her. Her family is pretty awful to her, even though we're hearing the story from her perspective, maybe that's being warped a bit. It still definitely seems like they're being pretty bad to her. Her sister is fine, like her stepsister Ophelia is a perfectly good kid, it seems, but Angel just kind of hates her because her stepfather really only cares about his daughter. And so Ophelia spills pizza sauce on Angel at Ophelia's birthday party at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. We haven't had a story in Freddy Fazbear's Pizza for a while, so it's nice to see that again, even if the main animatronics don't really come into play all that much. But yeah, Ophelia spills pizza sauce on Angel, and Angel is just really upset after that. And so she just basically runs off where she meets Dominic. Dominic is one of the managers here, the assistant managers, and so he helps her get cleaned up, and it's clear that they're both attracted to each other, but nothing really comes from that so far. He helps to clean her up, and she, I guess, vents about her life to him, which is great. And then she goes back to the party after all that. They have a nice talk, nothing that really affects the story very much. It's more of a way for the authors to really cement just how much she hates everything. She talks to him about her family, about her life, and then she leaves, basically, after she's been all cleaned up, and they talk about talking later, which they will. Now, this is a really interesting part. This is where the party is beginning to come to an end, and Ophelia is getting her big surprise. Now, there is a birthday gummy that is being lowered. It's basically what you see on the cover here. It's this gummy statue creature just made of candy and sugar, and it's moving, it's jerking around, it's flailing its limbs, it's moving almost like it's alive. Wouldn't that be crazy? And all the kids just start to devour this thing, but the gumdrop nose is the one that's saved specifically for the birthday girl, Ophelia. Only she can eat the gumdrop nose. And so the announcer says several times that that is only for her. So keep that in mind. But yeah, it's basically everyone's worst nightmare during a pandemic. You have all these kids basically in a pile eating from this same huge gummy statue. Very unhygienic, really. And then they leave. They leave the party, Angel is still pouting, and then it's revealed there is another surprise waiting for Ophelia. See, she really loves horses. That's kind of, it's just something about her character, I guess. She loves horses. And so they take a quick stop before they head back home. So Myron, Angel's stepfather, has actually bought Ophelia riding lessons on horses, and they spend a fair bit of time with Angel meeting one of the actual owners of these horses and this whole stable thing, where this other girl kind of explains just how expensive this is, which really does not help Angel's mood on the whole situation. But again, like, it's not like she's just being sour for no reason. It makes sense why she's upset over this, because while Ophelia gets all of this, thousands of dollars for her birthday, Angel just went to some restaurant, and it was a vegan restaurant because Ophelia chose which one they were going to. So it wasn't really Angel's choice in the first place. Later at home, Angel is still fuming, but she decides to call Dominic because she's just, she needs someone to talk to, and so she does. But Myron finds out she's calling whoever this guy is. He doesn't know. He never met Dominic. And so he's very upset that she's calling this random dude. And so there's this big argument. Angel kind of calls them out for just being really awful to her and yet treating Ophelia like a princess. And she gets really upset. And so she runs off. She goes to Ophelia's room, which is also pointed out to be much nicer than Angel's room and larger. And she goes, and apparently Ophelia had taken the gumdrop nose, which was supposed to be saved for her, and she hasn't eaten it yet. She decided to save it for later. So she's just got this in a crystal bowl in her room where she keeps all of her little treasures, and that's just where this gumdrop nose is hiding. And so Angel takes it, and she eats it in front of Ophelia, which again, Ophelia isn't a bad kid. It's more the parents who are just being awful, and so you can't really... It doesn't make sense that Angel would do this, because Ophelia hasn't done anything wrong. But she does. She eats this gumdrop nose in front of Ophelia, and obviously she's going to be distraught over this. And her parents are very upset, and so Angel goes, she hides in her room, she locks the door. As they are trying to get in, they're trying to break in, and I don't know. Angel mentions that they've never really been abusive to her, but she still obviously doesn't want to let them in the room, and so she locks the door, she puts on some music, and she just goes to sleep. She wakes up a little bit later at 11 p.m., and she is itchy. She's feeling itchy along her jaw, her neck, and her chest, and so she's wondering why. She goes and she looks in the mirror, and she sees that she's also got a bit of a red rash, and it's white in some places, and it feels squishy. Which, the foreshadowing here is incredible. I don't know how you can't know what's about to happen. And so she decides to take a shower and try and, get rid of the rash, something like that. And so she does, but when she comes out of the shower, she finds it's just all worse. She's starting to actually look scaly. And she thinks this might be because of what Dominic sprayed on her. It was water, she thought, but it might have been toxic, and so she decides she needs to call him. She needs to find out what's going on here. The rash is spreading, and so she tries to call Dominic and not wake her family up, and he tells her that he has no idea what's going on until she mentions that she ate the gumdrop nose, and then he tells her to go to Freddy's immediately. So it looks like he knows what's going on here, which would make sense since he works at the place. So she tries to drive there and look very inconspicuous. She wraps like a scarf around her so that no one can see. And she does this, and she makes it to Freddy's with one or two close calls. Dominic is there to meet her. They go inside. She's starting to feel dizzy. Her vision is cloudy. She feels like she's got cotton in her ears. And he leads her to the back room. He's telling her he's going to help her, that she's going to be okay. And he leads her to a box. He tells her to go inside, and she doesn't really ask why. She just accepts it because it wants to feel safe, I guess. Eventually, she falls asleep, and she wakes up later in this box. She can't move at all, and it's hard to tell whether that's because of the box or because of what's happening to her. But she hears a little bit of commotion. It's muted, and she's lowered down from this box, and, well, she's back in Freddy's, obviously, and she's in the big party room, and there's kids all around. She tries to flail around and escape, and she realizes she's been turned into candy for some reason, and these kids try and eat her, and that's the end of the story. So, there's that. Now, I don't know what this story means. Probably nothing. It's, again, a bit of a body-snatching idea, it seems. Something like that, even though it doesn't look like anyone's replaced her that we know of. Dominic was definitely... It wasn't like he was happy about what he was doing. It seems like this is all kind of his fault, but he definitely showed remorse for it. She says... Angel mentions that it sounded like he was crying as he lowered her into the box. So, while it seems like he's responsible for this, it doesn't look like it's what he wants to be doing. And the story just kind of ends there, which, is a good place to end it off on. This story definitely reminds me of some past ones, but I think it's done a lot better because you actually don't hate the main character, for once. And it's done well. Even though you can kind of tell what's going to happen in the end of the story way before it ever happens, it's still done well, and just to see it actually happen in the end, kinda, it is fulfilling in a way, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. It's hard to really put it into words, but it's not like it drags on. It's not like it kind of continues and you know what's going to happen, so it's not worth it. It is still definitely worth it, because while you're spending the time with these characters, you spend a little bit more time in the world, and you kind of understand what's going on until the end does come. All in all, the story is good, and apparently the next ones in this book are even better. So we'll get to those soon. I'm going to start reading them, and, well, I guess I'll talk about those as well. And, of course, the Stitchwraith epilogue, too. So, I'll see you guys then, and that's about it for now. Bye-bye. In this video, we're going to be talking about the newest story in Fazbear Frights. Last time we talked about Gumdrop Angel, and today we're talking about the second story in that same book, Sergio's Lucky Day. This one features an animatronic you will definitely recognize, and one that I think I've finally actually kinda liked because of this story. So, let's talk about it. So, first off, I want to talk about my quick little thoughts on this story. I think it's good. I say this about every single story, but this one is really weird, okay? I know I say that every time, but it seems like they're almost going for comedy at some points in this story, and it works pretty well. Some of the things that people say are just odd enough to be funny without being, like, unbelievable. The story definitely isn't supposed to be taken as seriously as some others. The ending kinda comes out of left field, so if you're taking this story completely seriously, you probably might have a problem with that. But if you're just here for the ride like I was, you'll enjoy it. And you'll see what I mean when we start talking about the summary of this story. So let's do that. So obviously this story follows Sergio. Now Sergio is sort of architect, designer person, and apparently he's really good at it because he's really just excelled ever since he's joined this sort of career. Apparently, most people his age have not gotten as far as he has in the whole architecture, I guess, industry. And at the very start of the story, things are actually going really well for him. In past stories, people have been, like, at their very worst when the story starts. Not in this one. In this one, he's actually doing pretty good. He's just been promoted, actually, to project manager. But yet he is depressed for some reason, like rich people often are when they have everything they want, but they still just don't really feel happy. This is kind of that on a smaller scale. He's got pretty good life, but he's just not happy about it, because he's just doing this because he feels like it's what comes next for him naturally, not because it's what he wants to do. Even his relationship with his girlfriend, Violet, he lies to her all the time just to try and make her happy, but he isn't happy at all with their relationship. I mean, she seems like a fair enough person, she seems like a good person, and so does he. There's just something that doesn't make them very compatible, and he just doesn't seem to like his job either, even though he's good at it. So he's kind of in a bit of a lost place right now. The girl he really wants, and this is kind of important, though I didn't think it was at first, is Sophia. Sophia is someone from his high school who he has not been able to stop thinking about since the almost exactly 10 years since he graduated in 1985. Keep that date in mind, because it's interesting. 1985 is the only year that's ever been mentioned in this series. It's obvious some stories take place later, like Fetch, which has smartphones, which means it's gonna take place later, but the only year that's ever been mentioned by name is 1985, and that definitely gets more interesting considering what happens later in this very story. So Sergio calls his parents, who are also characters that I should probably talk about a bit here, because they're somewhat important to the story. His dad is very successful. He has, I don't know, a lot of cars, apparently, is a detail they mention in the story. And then his mom, and he realizes the only reason he really called his parents about this promotion he got isn't because he's particularly happy about it, obviously, but because he just wants their validation. And as he works at this new position, he's sure he's making a little bit more, but he's also putting in a lot more hours, something that he also isn't very happy about. And all of a sudden, a string of bad luck starts to just kind of happen to him. All of a sudden it's raining, his papers get wet, his car literally breaks down, and it's not even that old of a car, so he's upset, and when he gets out of his car, he sees a trash can lying empty, or not empty, it's kind of fallen over on the side of the road, and there's all this trash kind of in it, falling out of it, and so he, just out of curiosity and just trying to get away from his situation. He goes and he just takes a passive look at this trash can, and he sees something interesting. There's a little toy lying where the trash can had spilled a little bit, and you should be able to recognize this character if you've been following the series for probably basically since the beginning. He's a pretty big character. He's got a propeller hat, he's got striped clothes, he's got ball hands, a triangle nose. Basically, his entire figure is round, really. And this is the description that the book gives him, by the way. This isn't just me trying to describe him for you. This is the description he gets, and on his chest, and this is really the only difference, says, "I'm a lucky boy." So yeah, Balloon Boy is in this story. Sergio tries to pick him up, and all of a sudden the toy is talking to him, which is weird because there's no speakers Sergio can see on this toy. It just doesn't have any that he can find at all. But it's talking to him, and so he starts talking to it. He asks it its name, which apparently just is Lucky Boy. And out of pure curiosity, he just decides to take it home. Now, all of a sudden, as he's going and he's trying to get help for his car, he decides, you know what? I'm gonna buy a lottery ticket, and this is partly because Lucky Boy tells him to do so. And he buys a lottery ticket, not really thinking much of it, but the next day he finds out he has won the lottery, and he's won $600,000. He's blown away, he doesn't know what to do with the money, and so for some reason he basically immediately asks Lucky Boy, and Lucky Boy just tells him to spend it. And this is kind of where the comedy of this story starts to come in. It's kind of hard to describe, but as you're reading this story, just the way Lucky Boy says things so bluntly, and the way he's giving Sergio just really bad advice, and Sergio just eats it up, and goes... He does some pretty insane things, because Lucky Boy tells him to do so. There's just something funny about it that I really cannot explain, and it's something that you kind of have to read for yourself. And so Sergio buys a new watch and a new car. He tells Violet, his girlfriend, that he's won the lottery, and he takes her out for dinner so he can, tell her this, and she asks him if he got her anything, which he realizes no, he did not. He bought himself a new watch and new car, but he basically forgot his girlfriend existed, and I mean, understandably, she's pretty upset over this. So he decides that he's just not going to worry about that. He'll get her something eventually. And he goes to work the next day, and turns out his car is stolen. This new car he bought is stolen. So he buys a new truck. I'm sure you can see where this is going. Lucky Boy kind of gives him advice to do all these kinds of things, but they're all very bad advice. But he keeps going. Again later, Violet asks him if he's got her anything, and then at this point, I mean, you're starting to notice that her character is a little bit annoying, but then again, so is Sergio's, and you start to see that these two just really don't like each other, and so eventually, Lucky Boy tells Sergio to break up with her, and he does, and he feels no guilt, he feels no remorse, he doesn't feel any regret, things that you would probably typically feel in that situation. He just kind of breaks up with her, and then he feels better for it. Again, these two just didn't really belong together, but Violet seems to be pretty upset over this, because she didn't see it coming, I guess. Sergio decides he doesn't like his job, and he wants to quit his job, he wants to start his own business. So what he wants to do is he wants to find a place, a pretty broken down place. He wants to renovate it, use his money to really make this place better, and actually a nice building, and then he's going to start a business there, and also live there, and he's going to be successful, I guess. He hasn't really thought it out completely, just like he hasn't thought out most of these decisions completely. So he looks for a real estate agent to help him find the right place to renovate and make nice, and he finds Claire, and he decides, you know what, it's time for a new relationship, one that I actually like. And he likes Claire, so he decides he's going to see if she can find him a place, and he's also going to ask her out, and he does, and they start dating now, pretty much immediately after he breaks up with Violet. And this is all, again, thanks to Lucky Boy's advice. But again, with this relationship, Sergio just starts to feel unhappy. He just starts to feel like he doesn't want this either. And I don't think it's because Claire is a bad person. She does, at least from what Sergio says, point out a lot of the things she doesn't like with him, very frequently, but I think that's just from Sergio's perspective. I don't think she's actually doing that. I think it's just what Sergio is saying she's doing, because he's just getting too airheaded. I don't know, he wants out of this relationship now too, and when he talks to her about this, she mentions Lucky Boy. Apparently, and this is never really shown in the story, but apparently she knows that he gets like all of his advice from this guy. So she's always been weirded out by this, but now that Sergio is upset with her, she decides it's about time she talks to him about this, and she mentions that it's really weird that he's getting all of his advice from this toy that he found on the side of the road. And so she decides she's going to throw it out. She tells him that he's better without it, and she holds it out of the window as they're in the car. Sergio basically leaps toward her, he tries to grab it from her, and the car goes off the road and it flips over. They're both pretty much fine, it seems, but now Carol's just, this is the last straw, she leaves. And she sues him for reckless driving, and Sergio doesn't seem to learn from this mistake again. Now Sergio is fixated on Sophia again for some reason, the girl from his high school that he just cannot seem to forget, and he immediately decides, okay, now he's gonna go and chase after her. And you can just see his life falling apart so quickly because he's taking all of his advice from this toy. Some of it makes sense, some of it is plausible, other parts of it you can't really see a normal person doing in real life, but it's all fine because the story doesn't, it does it in a way that makes it easy to understand and follow, even if maybe the decisions he makes don't make the most sense. You can tell it's not a story that's meant to be taken as seriously as some of the others. It just kind of continues, and I was at least okay with it. This is going to be a controversial story, and I know that, but I enjoyed it, and it seems like most other people do. As long as you're not looking for something that is too, I keep using the same word, serious, you'll be fine. And the ending, which we're about to get to in a second, definitely makes the whole thing worth it, just because of how insane it is. Now this is really interesting, okay? So Sergio finds out that there's going to be a high school reunion coming up very soon for 10 years since he graduated. It's now 1995, he graduated in 1985. This is interesting because in the Silver Eyes, which I have, in the Silver Eyes, which I have right here, the whole reason that our main characters get together in the first place is because of a class reunion of 1985. Now keep in mind, this isn't a high school reunion, it's a reunion of Michael's death, which happened in like, what was it, grade 3 or something? So it's not the same exactly, but again, it's a 10-year reunion of something that happened in 1985. Just an interesting little parallel. I'll fix this in a bit. Sergio wants to look snazzy for this thing because this is important. This is something that he needs to be ready for because he's going to meet Sophia again. He asks Lucky Boy what he can do to really impress people at this thing, specifically Sophia. He complains about his large ears, and Lucky Boy bluntly tells him to remove them. He immediately tells Lucky Boy what other features he wants to change, his hair, his nose, was it his jaw as well? His stomach, and Lucky Boy basically just tells him to fix them all, and Sergio grabs some scissors, and at this point you can definitely see what's going to happen, and this is where the scary part of things kind of comes in. We have a bit of a time skip to the party, which I'm assuming happens not too much later, as you'll see in a second. Sergio is walking in, everyone is at the party, they're having a good time, and Sergio realizes everyone is kind of looking at him for some reason, and so he looks behind him to see if they're actually looking at anyone else. It doesn't look like it. In fact, everyone behind him is just kind of backing away from him, it seems. He looks down and he sees just blood on the floor for some reason. Someone should really clean that up, he decides. But not him, because he has to meet with Sophia. He actually sees little bits of hair and flesh on the floor. Like, someone should really clean this up, you know? This is just irresponsible. So, Sergio continues. He decides that someone else can clean it up, and he goes to look for Sophia, as he carries Lucky Boy with him. And that's the end of the story. As you can see, that last twist kind of came out of left field, but I don't know, it's fun. It's a fun, weird, gross little twist, and I think the story is pretty good. None of it really feels like filler, because you can sort of see Sergio's descent into madness, I guess. Even if it is still abrupt at the end, you can kind of see that it's slowly trying to ease you into just him going full-out bonkers. But yeah, the ending is good, the story is good, our main character, our main antagonist are all good. I like this story. It's not one of my favorites. There's just, even though, obviously, again, it's not meant to be taken too seriously, I prefer those types of stories. But But this is still a good story, and I enjoyed it. Even though I know that most people probably might have different opinions, I don't know, it's going to be a controversial one. There's actually a really interesting detail that I realized is earlier in the story, where one of Sergio's old co-workers, before he decides to go off on his own, tells him, when he realizes Sergio's being a bit proud, a bit, full of himself, he tells him to not cut off his nose to spite his face, which, looking back at what happens in the ending makes a lot more sense now. That was a nice little bit of foreshadowing there was. I also can't help but wonder if the things he does to himself to make himself look better might be made to parallel the look of Balloon Boy or Lucky Boy. If he cuts off his nose, Balloon Boy kind of has... It almost looks like his nose is... I don't know, I'm probably looking too much into it, but it almost looks like it's made to, sort of parallel the look of Balloon Boy. I don't know, I'm looking too much into this. Anyway, that's pretty much all I have to talk about this story. I've started the third one already, and let me tell you, it is... The first sentence is already kind of mind-blowing because we're going to one of my favorite locations in the series so far. I think we're probably going to see one of my favorite antagonists for the second story in Fazbear Frights so far. One we've already seen, and we're going to see him again. And apparently there's a bunch of reveals in this next one. It's called What We Found, and I cannot wait, so I'll see you there. But until then, bye-bye. In this video, we're going to be talking about Fazbear Frights again, specifically the last story in Gumdrop Angel, What We Found, and this one is pretty crazy. It features a character we've already seen, just like in the last story. It features a setting that we've already seen, and with a lot of new stuff in this series, I really appreciate every once in a while us going back to fan-favorite settings and characters that I just love to see again. So, today we're covering this story, and we're also going to be talking about the new Stitchwraith story at the end of the book, which I'm sure nobody cares about that. So let's get to it. So the story follows Hudson, and Hudson works at Fazbear's Fright, a place that's basically just opened a little bit ago. He works as the security guard, and he also just kind of works with maintenance around the building with his friends Barry and Dwayne. And together they kind of manage this place, and there are other people who work here, like Virgil and Faith, but these are the guys we're going to be following for the most part, specifically Hudson. Hudson at first thought the job would be cool because it has good pay, even though the hours are pretty bad, but the bad hours is kind of what he's grown to focus on. Plus, he just generally finds the place creepy. He doesn't like the setting or the horror to it at all. Now, it's important to note right away that this Fazbear's Fright is different from the one in the games. It has a slightly different layout, which doesn't matter that much, but just to make sure we all know that this doesn't take place in the game's timeline or anything like that. It's its own contained thing. It's also important to note that as of right now, Springtrap is not in this location, and we haven't heard anything from, the Phantoms either. Basically, no real animatronics here at all so far. Hudson, when he does his security job, is in an office that sounds very similar to the one we're in FNAF 3. It has a vent right above his area with all the monitors and stuff, instead of where it seems to be below in the games, judging from FNAF VR. Just little details like that that don't really matter. Here's another important thing. In this story, we go through a lot of flashbacks, and that starts basically within the first 10 pages of the story, and it goes all the way to the last 10. There's just flashbacks very evenly throughout the story, and they kind of detail what Hudson's life is like, which is a very big focus in this story. Hudson's life is something we pay attention to a lot. When his father died at a young age, soon after his mother remarried, and she married Lewis. And Lewis was very abusive to Hudson, and just very mean. He would smoke tobacco all the time. He, at some point, threw Hudson against a wall. He was very awful, and Hudson kind of has quite a few flashbacks just detailing that and the other parts of his childhood that just weren't very good, which we'll get to in a second. In fact, Hudson's two friends, who we just mentioned earlier, Barry and Dwayne, have been his friends since childhood, but recently they've just been starting to move up the ranks a lot faster than he is. He's still stuck with this job, while these guys are just here until they can join the Navy and be out here. Hudson wanted to join as well, but he couldn't because of physical limitations, because he had been hurt so badly when he was younger. He's just not fit enough to join. Now, there's a bit of a hint that something interesting happened to Hudson, or he did something interesting a little while ago. As he's going through Fazbear's Fright in these first few pages, and he's kind of gathering in the area, describing it for us. The building itself seems very similar to what we've heard in the games. The real interesting part, as I mentioned before, is some of these characters. See, one of the girls Hudson works with, Faith, he actually asked her out a little bit ago, and they went on a date until afterwards she called him and asked him if he did it. Apparently, when Hudson was young, his house had burned down and Lewis had died inside. Now, we don't know if Hudson did cause the fire, that's a bit of a mystery, at least for now, but that seems to be what drove Faith away from him. And it's something that really haunts Hudson. Now, after their shifts, Hudson, Barry, and Dwayne go over to Charlie's, which is a local place where they just kind of have ice cream and hang out. They've been doing that since they were little. And they, over the course of their meal, talk about Hudson's grandma, who's a pretty important character in this story. Again, there's a lot of dialogue in these early parts that we need to get through before we get to, like, the just huge amount of action that happens later. Hudson's grandma is weird. She likes to make voodoo dolls of people she doesn't like. Even though she knows it's not going to do anything to them, she does it anyway. She makes little voodoo dolls of people that she doesn't like. It's just a thing she does. So after talking about his grandma, a few days later, Hudson actually goes and visits his grandma. And as we see that she's pretty smart, she tells Hudson that he needs to leave this job. He needs to leave this job for Fazbear's Fright. How she knows he should leave it? Who really knows? But she tells him to. She tells him that nothing good will happen if he stays there, and he doesn't really heed her advice, not because he doesn't agree. He hates this place. He thinks it's scary, he thinks it's weird, but he can't leave it because it's really the only job he's found in a while, and again, the pay is good even though the hours aren't. This is where things get interesting. See, when Hudson goes back to Fazbear's Fright for his next shift, he finds out that they've found something. And I'm sure you're gonna know what this is. It's Springtrap, obviously. I mean, they never really say it for a while now, but it's pretty obvious. They find it in a hidden room in the back of one of the old Freddy Fazbear's restaurants they've been kind of scrounging around. Is that a word? They found it in a hidden room. And now it's just in this box, which Hudson does not want to open as they show it to him, because he just doesn't want to see whatever this thing could be. They try and get him to open it and take a look inside before they actually put it into the attraction, but he just doesn't want to take a look. But later on, when Hudson's shift actually begins and he's working security in the office, he decides he needs to just face his fears already. He's been scared of this place for a long time, and it's about time he actually decides nothing here can hurt him. He needs to face it, he needs to go, he needs to see this animatronic that he hid from before, and he needs to actually take a good look at it, and then maybe he won't be so scared. So he walks all the way down the hall, basically to the start of the building, which I'm sure you'll remember in the games, Springtrap also usually starts at the very other end of the building from your office. So there's a little bit of interesting parallel. And he goes all the way down there, and he finds this thing attached to the wall. It's attached to the wall with metal around its joints. And, of course, it is Springtrap. It's a green rabbit, and it seems to have something inside of it. Hudson doesn't know this at first. At first, he's just creeped out by the fact that there's this moldy green rabbit attached to the wall. But then he takes a closer look, and he sees what he thinks to be something reddish inside. He assumes it's fake at first, and so he touches it, and no, he realizes this is very real tissue. He doesn't think it's human tissue, but it's from something, and that is enough to send him spiraling back, and he kind of backs away from the thing, and he doesn't want anything more to do with it, and now he's even more scared of this thing than before. He tries to convince himself that this can't be real. There's no way they actually found a robot thing with someone dead inside of it, or whatever this is, until a voice tells him it's real. Who is this voice? Who is reading his mind? Because it's not like he said any of this out loud. Well, we find that out sooner than I would have expected. At first, of course, you're going to think it's William Afton, because, it's Springtrap. It's going to be William Afton inside. But apparently, the voice actually seems to belong to Hudson's old teacher, Mr. Atkin. Atkin. Which is a name that sounds so similar you can tell they're trying just not to say it outright. Now the weird thing is, Mr. Atkin, other than his name sounding familiar, does not have any resemblance to William. Apparently he was just a teacher who really didn't like Hudson because Hudson could never really do the math in his class. He always struggled with math class. And so Mr. Atkin, from inside this robot, I guess, starts calling Hudson stupid and saying that he should just do the math and figure it out. It seems like he's talking to Hudson through his head, But it also seems like Hudson is definitely hallucinating this. I don't think, and you're gonna see why I'm saying this later, I don't think there's actually any math teacher inside Springtrap. I think whatever's going on is inside Hudson's own head. He tries to get away from this thing, but he can't help but go back. He tries to hide it in a closet, but it's connected to the wall too much. The connections are too strong. He can't break it off the wall and hide it somewhere, because just looking at the thing makes him really uncomfortable and starts to bring back those awful memories of math class. Eventually he decides he just needs to leave it alone. He knows the voices must be in his head, and he decides to leave. He goes through the little arcade area of this building. None of the arcade machines seem to actually work. They're all broken down and creepy to kind of fit the aesthetic. And as he does every night, he sort of taps his nightstick on the metal of the arcade machines in a sort of rhythm. But tonight he realizes someone is singing along with him. So Hudson looks around to find where these voices are coming from, and he sees the stage, and the characters on stage, which by the way aren't the real characters from Freddy's, they're remade. They're not they didn't find them like they found Springtrap. These are recreated, so they're not really Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica, or whoever these characters are. But they're singing along with him. Their mouths are moving, and it seems like they're singing along with the melody he's kind of tapping out on the arcade machines. And so he's freaked out by this, and he tries to back away again, and he's not sure what to do about this. He's not sure if he's imagining it, and all of a sudden his nightstick gets thrown out of his hand, and he's tossed against a wall. And suddenly, he's back in his childhood bedroom, and now Lewis is throwing him against the wall. Hudson realizes his wrist is broken, and he looks down at it. And then he looks back up, and he realizes he's back in the arcade. And now I think we can officially say, yeah, Hudson is all of a sudden losing his mind. I'm not sure why it's happening so suddenly. This is the type of thing you'd, I guess, kind of expect to happen more over time. But it seems like all of a sudden, as soon as he entered for today's shift and saw that rabbit, he started going insane, and I'm not sure why. So Hudson retreats back to his office to kind of regroup, and he notices he still is hurt. He didn't imagine the pain. Something did hurt him, and he realizes he still doesn't have his nightstick. It's still back in the arcade. So he notices a hammer nearby that he used to fix his desk a little while ago that he just never cleaned up, and he picks it up and he decides he's going to use this to protect himself. He goes back and he decides he needs to take out whatever this robot thing is that they brought in today. Only it's gone. The hooks are still on the wall, and they're still connected, but nothing is attached to them. Whatever that robot thing is, it's gone. So Hudson kind of twirls around and he's looking for it every which way, because who knows where it could come from, and he's backing up, trying to get back to the office, when he decides he's not going to make it. Wherever this thing is, he's not going to find it, and he sort of retreats to the bathroom, and you can see he is terrified. He can barely go a few steps without needing to regroup again. So he makes it to the bathroom, and he kind of sits down and he tries to regroup, and he hears Mr. Atkins' voice in his head again, calling him stupid, 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 over and over, and he doesn't know where it's coming from. He goes into one of the stalls and he tries to clear his head, and all of a sudden his head is being pushed into the toilet, and now he's getting a swirly and he's back in school. And all of the bullies that used to bully him when he was a kid are pushing his head under the water. Hudson yanks his head out of the toilet, and all of a sudden he's back in Fazbear's Fright again. And you can see there's a pattern going on here. Yep, he's going insane, but at the same time he's having weird flashbacks back to his childhood, back from between them and back to Fazbear's Fright in the present. And when he gets back to the present this time, he notices that the toilets are completely dry, as is his head. Even so, he goes to the sinks and he tries to scrub his head because he feels disgusting, as I'm sure you would if your head had just been stuck into a toilet. What is happening? Then he hears a chuckle almost immediately coming from the vent beside him, and the non-stop action just kinda continues. He throws his hammer at the vent where he sees Springtrap's head there laughing, but the head ducks back into the vent and his hammer just hits the metal walls of the vent. So he decides he needs to climb in there and needs to take out this rabbit. He climbs into the vent, grabs his hammer again, and goes after the rabbit. He crawls through the vents for a while, and he doesn't see anything at first, until he's attacked and grabbed from behind on his leg. He turns around and sees nothing the first time. But then he continues on and it gets grabbed a second time. He looks backward and he sees a yellow arm that seems to be from Chica grabbing him from behind. Now, it's described that for some reason they put more animatronic props in the vent of this place, which doesn't really make sense because you wouldn't think anyone would be going in here. Apparently the place is fully decorated, and they even put little fake animatronics in the vent, Only this one doesn't seem to be fake because it really is attacking Hudson. He tries to attack the arm that's holding him, and he eventually gets it to let go, and he continues on his way, faster than before, trying to get away. And I'm noticing at this point, as I was reading the story, this seems to be much more about the phantoms than about Springtrap. See, I already found it weird that since we'd already had a story about Springtrap in the flesh, that we were going to have another one. We've never had a story about the same character twice. But these types of mass hallucinations we're seeing could totally be something the phantoms are causing, and even though we never see them in the building, apart from, like, I guess maybe this sort of Chica character, you could maybe squint at it and say it's Phantom Chica, but I don't know. It seems like this is something more that the phantoms would do. Springtrap is just a dead guy in a costume. The phantoms could actually cause these hallucinations, and yet we never see them, so I'm really not sure. So he tries to escape Chica, all while having more flashbacks about his date with Faith and how terribly it went because of the fire. Remember how he was a suspect for the fire that killed his stepfather, and then Faith found out about it years later when they were on their date, and now she hates him, I guess. It was kind of mentioned in passing, but it's important. Chica follows after him, even though she's supposed to just be an inanimate object. And as he escapes the vent, he grabs behind him, grabs Chica, and throws her onto the floor. She stops moving, but now all of the other parts that are kind of littered around the pizzeria, all the different costumes and creepy stuff, starts to kind of swirl around Chica. And then it pulls Chica apart. I know, it's so weird. This story is so strange. Hudson tries to continue on his journey, and he decides instead of going after this robot, which he can't beat, what he's going to do is he's going to break out of here. So, he grabs the nearest weapon, and he tries to find a window to escape from. This place, obviously windows would probably make it less creepy looking out into what's going on actually outside, so there's very few, but he tries to find one. And as he's going, the characters' mouths on the walls start to whisper at him and tell him, "Stupid, stupid, stupid," just like Mr. Atkin apparently did in math class. It's getting louder and louder, and he's seeing these characters' mouths move, and their voices are getting louder and louder, and eventually he just curls on the floor, he tries humming to himself, he can't get them out of his head, and then he wets his pants. Actually. And then we flash back again to when Hudson was younger, and he peed his pants, and Lewis started making fun of him and bullying him and abusing him. And Hudson is now rapidly switching between the past and the present. Almost every paragraph he's switching to being in this dark room in this establishment and being back home with Lewis. And eventually Hudson just decides he can't escape. Every time he tries, he gets these things attacking him, and there seems to be no way to stop them, so what he's just going to do is he's going to have to wait here, wait out the night, until Barry and Dwayne come in the morning to help him. And eventually, the sort of flashbacks, the sort of hallucinations he's getting do start to slow down as he just sits here with his broken wrist, his wet pants. He sits here, and eventually things do start to quiet down until he hears Springtrap coming down the hall. By now, Hudson's in the kitchen, and he grabs a knife on the counter and tries to throw it at Springtrap, but he misses, and Springtrap tries to grab the knife instead, but he fails. Springtrap is approaching too fast, and eventually he just abandons the idea altogether and runs again. He keeps running and running and running all the way to the end of the building, farthest away from his office where Springtrap was originally hanging, and then he sees Springtrap is still there, attached to the wall by the hooks. And it doesn't look like he's moved at all. He runs again, not thinking clearly at all. And now he remembers his grandma's old words. See, what she used to always say was, "Heat purges, fire heals." He never really understood why she said that. At least he doesn't admit he knew why she said that. But given what's about to happen and what's about to be revealed that did happen, I think there might have been a good reason she said this whole thing. And Hudson thinks of the oven in this building. He realizes the oven might be able to hide him. It's really the one place in this establishment that actually should be small enough and discreet enough to hide him. So he goes back to the kitchen and he hides in the oven. And he has another flashback. Now he's back to being a kid, and Lewis is looking for him. Hudson is hiding in the fireplace, and Lewis can't find him, so he leaves. Hudson managed to get out of the fireplace when he was younger. He managed to get out before the fire had started and before it could burn him too bad. He made it out of the house, but Lewis never did. And now, as he's looking back on that, as he's sitting in the oven and he remembers this, he starts to question whether he really didn't set the fire. He didn't think so. He didn't remember doing it. But now this locked away memory that he'd hidden far away from his mind seems to be coming back to him. He remembers he had stolen Lewis's lighter. He had stolen it and he had crawled into the fireplace, and after Lewis stopped looking for him, he had lit the fire, he had left the fireplace, and Lewis had burned alive inside. And as Hudson comes back to the present, he realizes the oven is heating up too. He tries to get out, but he realizes the oven won't open. It's locked. And as flames shoot up in the fireplace, it gets hotter and hotter. And then we cut to Barry and Dwayne. Now, I don't know how the oven actually started, how it heated up. Did Hudson do it? I don't know. It never mentions it. Maybe he found a lighter again and did the same thing he did when he was younger. Only this time he couldn't escape. We'd never really find out. All we know is a fire was started and Hudson didn't manage to make it out. So yeah, Barry and Dwayne come back to Fazbear's Fright in the morning, talking about how sorry they feel for Hudson and how they really wish things were better for him. And as they enter the building, they smell an almost burnt flesh smell. And as they're looking for its source, they find the oven. And that's where the story ends. It's really sad. Maybe while I'm reading this, it sounds a bit convoluted. It sounds a bit like things are happening really quickly. And they are. They are. There's so much stuff going on. It's flashing between these two time periods. I guess more than two, really. It's different points during his childhood and during his past. And when I'm just describing it to you, it goes by even faster because I have to get it done in like, I don't know, half an hour. So there's a lot that happened, but it's a good story. This is probably my favorite in the book, and it seems to be the general consensus to everyone that, yeah, it's probably the best one in the book. It features an animatronic we've seen before, and whose first story I really didn't like all that much, but this one is done so much better. In it, he actually has a connection to our main character, Hudson. He's almost representing Hudson's past, and Hudson's own demons. And while Hudson eventually doesn't seem to end up actually facing them, at least he tries, and the way the story is told, and the way it connects to him, and the way it's just so tragic, it really works for me. I'm not sure if there's supposed to be any lore hints here. The parallels between Hudson and the bite victim are very clear, which might be hinting that the bite victim is Michael, but I don't think so. I think Hudson is definitely supposed to be a Michael parallel, at least, but I'm not sure what more it's supposed to tell us. All I know is I really like this story, and I would love to see more of this done. The Cliffs, the last book, had a lot of stories that just weren't really that connected to the source material. This story has 2 out of 3. This book has 2 out of 3 stories that are actually connected to characters we know, and one of them has even a place we know, which is really cool, and I'm a big fan, so I really hope that the series, as it continues to do more stuff like this. Don't get me wrong, I like the Cliffs too, but I think this is definitely a step up. That's about it for now. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye. In this video, we're going to be talking about the newest chapter in the Stitchwraith story. Now, this is one that is actually coming to an end very soon. Obviously, the Fazbear Frights series in general is ending very soon, so it seems like we're approaching an ending. We're just not quite there yet, but there's some really interesting things I want to talk about here, and we actually seem to be about to go back to a previous story, one that we've seen already in this universe, and one that might be having a sequel, a comeback. Maybe it's just one reference, but it doesn't quite seem like it, and you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. But first, so I was going to put the normal subscriber song here like I always do, but I have something else I'd like to say. I hosted an ARG the other day for 6,000 subscribers. Thank you again, by the way. And we actually had a pretty good turnout. We had a couple people win already, and it's still up if you want to play it, by the way. It'll be just on my channel, or I might put it in the description too. We'll see. I believe the first winner was I Drew, and I just wanted to kind of congratulate him on actually completing this puzzle. It was tricky, and I kind of wish I'd made it easier, but there were some parts that definitely were a bit of a struggle. But hey, like, we had a bunch of people make it, and I Drew was the first one to get there, which is, that's a pretty good achievement. So, I just wanted to congratulate him once again, and if you want to check out that puzzle for yourself, you can do so. Okay, back to the video. This Stitchwraith story starts with Detective Larson waking up in the hospital after the big battle that took place in the last Stitchwraith story. So after this big battle, he was infected with something that came from Afton or from some other evil creature that was in Afton's amalgamation. Jake managed to heal him by apparently burning it away, but he seems to be overall pretty much fine, and nothing's infecting him anymore, although the doctors are very confused about why he has a hand-shaped burn mark on his stomach, but he doesn't tell them because obviously they'd think he's crazy. So over the next few days, he's taken off work because the police chief just doesn't want him to be working if he's been hurt so bad. And so Larson spends a few days just hanging out with his kid and actually spending time with him, but the whole time he can't really stop thinking about what happened. And to make matters worse, he's been having weird vision issues. He had a CAT scan and apparently nothing's wrong with him, but he's been having weird vision issues ever since the surgery. Sometimes he'll actually be in Freddy's, sometimes he'll be in a movie theater with friends who apparently aren't his but are someone else's. Don't know who yet, maybe Oswald's, and you'll see why I think that in a second, because the main thing he sees is a ball pit. A old, kind of dirty ball pit. Sometimes he's in it, sometimes he's looking at it, but it's always a ball pit. And he decides he needs to find this ball pit. I think it's pretty obvious this is the same one from Into the Pit. Why it's showing up again, I'm not sure. It doesn't seem to be a passing reference, and as this story continues, you'll see it just... They keep going back to it. There's something important about this ball pit, the first story in the series, that for some reason we're going back to it after all this time. Meanwhile, Jake is actually in a dark alley, and he finds a man behind a dumpster. Apparently, Jake's just been hiding for 9 full days since the battle, and now he comes across this man who at first I thought might be Grim, but it never really names him. I think it probably is, but we're not quite sure. And Jake, again, seems to be able to sense people's memories and sense what they're feeling. And this is weird because obviously Grim has a troubled past. Apparently there was some sort of car accident where only he survived, and that sent him into just insanity. And now he's miserable all the time, but somehow Jake manages to actually... Well, I'll read it. It says, Jake concentrated, and he sent his thoughts back through the soup of memories he'd just seen. Maybe he could pull one out, a good one, and make it bigger and brighter than the rest. If he could ease the man's pain. And he does. Somehow he manages to pull out the happy memories this man had, and I guess make the man a bit happier. It's very strange, but apparently Jake can somehow manipulate people's memories. And then, as he walks away from this man, apparently having made him happier, he hears sounds coming from a building nearby, so he goes inside. Inside, he finds a girl who seems to be unconscious, and apparently the first thing he thinks of when he sees her is one of those Just Say No to Drugs commercials. Apparently she looks like someone out of that, and so he tries to help her. He decides she needs water because she looks like she's sick. She looks like she's unhealthy. And so he decides he needs to get her some water, but before he can, 2 men walk into the room. Jake is pretty sure they're drug dealers. Whether he's right, I have no idea, but that's what he thinks. And apparently she does owe them money, and so Jake tries to get them to stay away from her because they're trying to hurt her. Jake picks up one of the men, and he basically picks him up over his head, and then he throws him out a window. The other guy gets thrown into a stack of boxes, and then Jake starts writing something on his forehead. We don't get to see what it is yet, but we will. And Jake decides he needs to help this girl, and so he leaves. Meanwhile, Larson has found the ball pit. An old man has left him in, and this whole building, which is obviously Jeff's Pizza, has been abandoned. But Larson manages to get in, and he kind of wants to go into the ball pit for some reason, but he decides not to, after he feels what seems to be blood inside, and he decides he needs to leave, and he just does. He doesn't even think more about it. So he's going to be coming back here, but for now it seems like he is deciding he needs to come up with another plan. It seems like he's going to be trying to figure out where this ball pit came from and what happened in this building, which obviously we have some idea. Meanwhile, again, we're back in a hospital. Whether it's the same one, I don't know, but these 2 guys who Jake hurt have been in the hospital, and basically we just see the nurses taking care of them and trying to help them, and on the one man's forehead is written, Just Say No, so I guess that's a fun gag. Meanwhile, again, Jake is now with the girl hiding in an abandoned shed of sorts, and he's basically hiding away, trying to protect her, trying to help her in some way, though he really doesn't have much of an idea how. It's the middle of the night, and as he's trying to help her, he hears something outside, something scurrying around, something banging against the walls of this shed, and he's not exactly as tough as he was when he was dealing with the supposed drug dealers before. Now he's just as scared as she is, and just like us, he has no idea what's outside and what's trying to get in. And that's the end of this Stitchwraith story. That's it. I honestly have no idea what could be trying to get inside. It kind of reminds me of the Breaking Wheel, where Julius and the exoskeleton are like trying to break into the house. It kind of reminds me of that, but that's probably just a coincidence. And I also have no idea why the ball pit is back. I'm sure there's a reason, I just don't know why. Something is important about that thing, and I've always kind of thought that. I've always found the tear under Spring Bonnie's eye very interesting. I've always found the fact that this ball pit can somehow time travel very interesting. The whole place, I always felt like we didn't quite get enough answers there. But now, maybe we will. Obviously this is leading up to something, so I'm not expecting answers right now, but I'm really excited to see where this goes in The Puppet Carver, which is coming out in a little over a month, so, I mean, I guess we'll get to find out. Until then, I'll see you guys then, and okay, bye.